So this is the reading room. This is where we provide access to our archive and library collections. Those collections are firstly a reference collection, part of which you can see around the walls of the room. That supports the work that the curators do. And then in terms of archival collections, we have about 140 archival holdings at the moment, and those are collections of materials that relate to one individual artist in some instances, but then also larger collections, sometimes organisational archives. For example, the Society of Scottish Artists have deposited their archive with us. So there's a real range of material here, and then we also have special collections, and that's the category under which the material that I'm going to show you today falls. So we have special books, but we also have a really outstanding artist books collection. Okay, so this is quite a recent acquisition. It's a little Russian futurist book from 1912. It is quite an early example of a bookwork, and it really kind of breaks the boundaries of what an artist's book is at this period of time. It's very radical. The title is also collaged on, and you can see, I mean, we're actually quite lucky that things like this have survived because they're not very durable. You can see that the stapled binding is sort of pulling itself apart here. The pages are all different sizes. The paper is very thin and very poor quality. So this is pre-First World War. These are hand lithographed images and text, and then some rubber stamped text as well. And none of this was an accident. This was on purpose. So this kind of, it almost is a bit like a modern zine in that it was produced very roughly and quickly to kind of break down those ideas of what a book was and could be. Goncharova and her contemporaries were, I suppose, riffing on what the Italian futurists had been establishing, which was kind of an anti-art attitude. So they were looking at something that was quite democratic. Goncharova was looking at Lubbock prints, for example, sort of popular, cheap prints that were produced. The handwriting is generally by the artist, and the poets enjoyed that collaborative element. They thought that the artist's handwriting added something to the meaning of the text. And folk art as an influence. So it's really quite a groundbreaking little book, and great for us to have, and really important in the trajectory of the history of the artist's book as well. So this is an example of a surrealist publication published by Éditions du Carrefour in 1930 by an artist called Calude Cahun. The book is titled Avunon Avenue, which translates as Disavowals. And it contains text by Cahun and photo collages, which were a collaborative effort made by her partner Marcel Moore, who also adopted that name later in life. She was born Suzanne Malherbe. And the text is really Cahun examining her identity, and she talks quite a lot about gender actually. So the collages are made using childhood photographs, drawn elements. They are quite surreal in their content and their mood. They use some of the classic self-portraits that Cahun is so well known for. She considered herself more a writer than an artist, and actually the works, the photographs that she produced lay undiscovered for decades. But this publication in 1930 is quite a groundbreaking thing, because this is actually her projecting and discussing her identity in a public forum. So this is our copy of Jazz by Henri Matisse, and it was published in 1947 by Teriad, who had been in discussion with Matisse for quite a long time about producing a livre d'artiste. So the format of this book is classic livre d'artiste, and that was a form that was established in the late 19th century. You can see when I open it up that it is loose leaf, Our copy was acquired in the 1980s. And this was published both as a livre d'artiste, but also in a portfolio edition so that people could mount up the prints. And the prints themselves are translations of cutouts that were produced by Matisse, who was very ill by this point. He was bedridden, so he wasn't able to stand at an easel and paint. So he would sit in his bed, and his nurse, Lydia Delektorskaya, would paint sheets of paper with gouache, and then he would use scissors to make cutouts, which were then pinned to the wall according to his instructions. So these prints are a translation of those original cutouts. This is the title page. This writing that you see is Matisse's own writing, lithographically produced, and it's quite an important element of the book, although he downplayed the importance of the content. The content is really Matisse talking about the process of painting and seeing, and it's quite kind of stream of consciousness. It does tie in some ways to the themes that are covered in the images, but it's also there as a spacer. So it's really important to kind of view the book as an entire object, because it makes you turn the pages slowly, and then when you hit one of the prints, if I can open the page, you have that breath between the intensity of the colours. So Matisse travelled to Tahiti in the 1930s, and in the text he actually talks about the experience of looking down from an aeroplane. These three images are really that kind of almost aerial view of the landscape of Tahiti. So this is a book, a 6-volume book that was published by Printed Matter in New York, and it's by an artist called Tauba Auerbach. The title 2-3 refers to the space between 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions, which is a key interest of Auerbach's. It was published in 2011, but she actually began work on it around 2008, 7 or 8, so it had quite a long gestation. As you will see why, because it took quite a lot of technical working out. So there are 6 volumes, and if I take the first one out here and open it, so each volume contains a 3-dimensional geometric shape, but actually the action of opening and closing the volumes is what's important, because it moves between 2 dimensions of the flat book and 3 dimensions of the pop-up shape. And so this is the first volume, this is the pyramid, and if I close it again, you can see the action. Move that to one side. This to me is one of the best examples of a contemporary artist book or book work. It really kind of explores the format. It plays with the idea of what a book is and what it can be. The second shape is a sphere. And you can see why it took such a long time to bring this into being, because it's a very complex object. These are the gems. It was published in quite a large edition of 1,000 copies, so an even bigger project because of that. This is the Helix, which is something that crops up again and again in Auerbach's work. She's actually founded a press called the Diagonal Press to publish books like this. Not as ambitious as this, but really interesting nonetheless. And then the final volume They're quite striking, which is quite unusual for a contemporary artist book, which can often be quite text heavy and quite normal in appearance, often quite commercially published. Whereas this is really quite an ambitious and exciting object, and something that we really enjoy sharing with people.